Welcome to the Challenge Cycling Podcast. And now we have all the way from Australia, Cyrus Monk, former under-23 Australian champion, recent winner of the points classification jersey at Tour Down Under, and races for Evo Pro Continental cycling team. And when racing was suspended on the continent due to coronavirus, we were lucky to have Cyrus compete in some of our races in our club league here in Galway. Cyrus, you're very welcome. Thanks for joining us on the other side of the world. And tell me, how are things going at the moment? In Australia, you're pretty much opened up.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. We've been super lucky here for the last 4 or 5 months. We've been relatively COVID-free, so being able to race my bike and then, live the good life off the bike as well. So I've been super lucky to be back here. It's just definitely a bit of an unusual race season once again. So usually I'd do the Australian summer and that'd finish up at the start of February, and then I'd come over to Europe either end of February or mid-March. I'd always be over there, but this is the latest I've been in Australia for the last 3 years, just because it's still so uncertain in Europe with the racing that's going on. Like there's times where we'll think, all right, we've got a good block of racing coming up, and then all of a sudden we've only got one race for the next month. So unfortunately that's what we've got at the moment. For April, we've got one really good race start in Belgium there, and then for the rest of the month, not much at all. So there has been a lot of racing in Australia. I've been lucky that I've been able to race here, but the goal definitely is still to get over to Europe and get into the big stuff.
So you moved back to Australia at the end of August, was it? From Ireland, and you've been racing since in Australia.
I was in Ireland up until August, and then I was lucky to get a month of racing in Belgium and France in September. So I was still in Europe up until November. So I spent most of October traveling around trying to find a visa so I could stay over, because it's so difficult to get back to Australia from Europe at the moment with the quarantine and also just so many flights being cancelled. So I was initially trying to stay over there, and then it was just impossible to do that legally. I'd already overstayed in Ireland during the lockdown because I couldn't move anywhere, and I'd planned on going there for a week in between races, and then just ended up staying for 4 months. So that was well over the tourist visa that I had to travel there. And then basically I was planning on staying for the winter, but I couldn't legally stay, and I managed to find a flight luckily, and then got back to here. And then since I've been back in Australia, we've been basically COVID free. Like I think we've had less than 100 cases the whole country since that point. So it's been a completely different lifestyle here to what I would have had being in Europe, and definitely pretty lucky to have been here for sure.
Yeah, we're under a 5 kilometer limit for since Christmas really. So I think you made the right decision.
Yeah, I think I spent a lot of the first lockdown, spent a lot of time in that 2K limit doing laps of the house, and wasn't too keen to go back and start that one again.
When I'm walking, I strut my stuff, and I'm so strung out.
Yeah, it was tough. And you were in quarantine too, also for 2 weeks when you were here.
Yeah, so that was part of the thing putting me off coming back here, was the hotel quarantine. And then I ended up having to do that in Adelaide because there was no flights into Melbourne at the time I was flying back. So did that, and then eventually got home probably, I think it was 18 days after I left Ireland. I finally got to my house in Australia, so it was a pretty long transit, but I was pretty happy to be back here and have a bit of freedom, and a Australian summer is as good as it gets for training. So it was perfect for that.
Let me go on.
You must have been chalk and cheese, because when you were in Ireland, you were kind of in the Midlands based, weren't you?
Yeah, it's not too dissimilar to where I am now. Like I live in the wettest part of Australia, and I still don't understand how our rainfall says it's similar to what it is. I was staying just near Moat, so just outside of Athlone in the middle of Ireland there. But I compared, and we have similar rainfalls, but I swear it rained every single day I was there last year. But here we'll sort of get the big storms and dumping rain, whereas there it's just on and off for the whole day, pretty much every day. So I definitely don't miss that kind of thing. And also our summer here, we'll go weeks at a time without a drop of rain. So that's awesome for training.
I was following your Twitter there while you were in quarantine, and you used your time very productively. So this is your musical side.
Thank you. You're far too kind. Woo. Yeah, buddy. Woo. Yeah, can I get an encore? Do you want more? Cook and roll with the Brooklyn boss. So for one last time, I need y'all to roll. What the hell are you waiting for? After me, there shall be no more. So for one last time, make some noise. Get him, Cy. I become so numb, I can feel you there.
So tell us, what was the crack with quarantine and making music?
Yeah, so it was never something I planned on when I was going in there. I think just I have just a tin whistle that I always have just traveling around with me, just because it's easy to have traveling, and I learnt that as a kid. Funnily enough, like don't have any family connection to Ireland. I'd just grown up playing that. It was an instrument I learnt in school, and then I knew how to play that. And as I was traveling around Europe trying to get a visa, I had a stopover in Scotland, in Edinburgh, and just to pass the time, I went into a music shop because it was about the only thing open, just as things were getting locked down again at the start of November there. And I bought a harmonica in there and thought, I'll just try and play this. If we're going back into lockdown again, it'll give me something to do. And then a week later, I was back in Australia in a hotel room, but I had just those two things with me and thought, right, well, I've got nothing to do here. Like, I've got 2 weeks with plenty of time on my hands. I'll just try and learn the harmonica. Does anyone have any requests? Like, I sort of put that up on my Instagram, just thinking I'll do some stupid little things. And then just the first day just got a little bit carried away, and people said, this is really cool, can you do this song next? And got a few more requests in, and then each day sort of put a little bit more effort into it, to the point where I was getting completely carried away and I was taking up most of my day. But that was actually a bit of a blessing by the end, because I didn't have that much else to do in there, so it was a good way to pass the time.
Yeah, like, you need to keep saying, don't you? You need to have some kind of focus, like, and have something like music is really, really great. Like, were you able to train when you were in quarantine? Were you with Turbo, or how did all that work?
Yeah, I was really lucky. I just got in contact with Cycling Australia when I landed, and it was a bit of a Hail Mary. I thought they won't help me out at all here, because they've got their own athletes. In Adelaide is where we have our high performance unit, so our track team's based there. It's sort of like our equivalent of Irish Cycling's Mallorca. Like, we've got our setup there, the best tracks there, and all of the gears there. So I thought, I might be lucky here and they'll have a turbo sitting around. So I asked for that, and they just said, yeah, we'll have a mechanic drop one off to you this afternoon. So I was super lucky there, and a bike with it, because I didn't fly back with my bike because it was sort of such a hurry to leave. And I had a bike and a turbo supplied by them. And then, funnily enough, Adelaide, one of the quarantine hotels, there was an outbreak from one of the incoming travelers, and Adelaide went into lockdown while I was stuck there in the hotel. So all of the athletes were suddenly asking for the turbos that the Cycling Australia has, all the trackies. And I had one in my hotel that they weren't allowed to come and get out because I was in quarantine. So I was lucky that 2 days either side and I wouldn't have had one. But I'm a known hater of the turbo. I always prefer I'd ride it in a blizzard before I'd ride on one of those by choice. So it was a tough 2 weeks just getting through an hour or two on that a day.
I'd say the furniture piled up against the hotel room door in case Cycling Australia came for it.
Yeah, well, the good thing was they asked if they could come and get it, and I said, yeah, look, if they let you, then you can have it back. I'm sick of riding it anyway. And they asked the hotel, and the hotel said, no, there's strictly nothing can come out of those rooms for the 14 days because they've been so strict on it in Australia. But we were sort of treated like lepers when we arrived, which isn't the nicest way to come back to your home country. But yeah, we've been pretty free of COVID for the last 6 months now, just about.
Yeah, it was worth suffering 2 weeks on the turbo, I can tell you.
Yeah.
What do you do to make the turbo bearable? What's your go-to?
For me, I've purposely sort of staying away from Zwift because I just don't want to get addicted to that. I just always prefer to ride my bike outside. But for me, it's just keep it short and sweet. Trying to build up the volume to just do multiple short stints rather than sitting on there for 3 hours at a time.
And do you find you can you push it as much on the turbo as you would out on the road, like training with your teammates or a few buddies?
I personally can't at all. My numbers are always way down on the turbo, but I always just have to tell myself that it's just the training that I'm doing it for rather than I'm not going to be going and bragging to anyone about my numbers on the turbo after. It's just the training benefit that I'm looking for. So if it's a time where I have to use it, then I will. But I think before quarantine, it had been a few years since I jumped on one for anything more than a warm-up. So I'll always just get out in whatever the weather is as much as I can because I'm definitely an outdoors person.
Funny, you had a question there from one of the lads in the club, Brendan Dunleavy, and he was asking about heat training without a fan. Is it something you'd ever do to acclimatize?
Yeah, I think that kind of thing, especially in Ireland, because you can't do heat training outside ever because it doesn't get hot enough. So yeah, anything that's going to raise your core body temperature up to that 39, 40 degrees kind of mark, which is going to be if you don't have a fan, that's going to help that. You just have to be really careful and understand that your numbers are going to be way down, like your power output, and your heart rate's going to be way up. And you're not the goal isn't to be doing amazing power; it's to just be getting your body really hot so it can adapt to that kind of thing, and also handle dehydration. So I'd still recommend I wouldn't be doing that with any kind of painkillers or caffeine or anything that might stop your body's natural response, because if you're doing that kind of thing and overheating, you want that to be the only stress so that you know when to stop rather than pushing it too far and that kind of thing.
You got to watch out for the missus too when she sees the sweat pouring out underneath the door in streams.
Yeah. No, that's certainly not pretty. That was the worst bit about the quarantine room is there was no fan in there and no windows. So we weren't allowed to open the windows.
Really?
Or we didn't have a balcony or anything because of the quarantine situation, like the virus risks. So yeah, it was just crazy hot.
And tell us, just kind of bring us back there to kind of how you got into cycling and to a bit about your kind of early life.
I growing up, I played mostly Australian football, so it's obviously pretty similar to Gaelic football there, but we've got a funny shaped ball. And then that in the winter, and then cricket in the summer, which is the standard Australian combination, basically. And then I was riding a bike a little bit to and from school, that kind of thing, just a crappy old mountain bike kind of thing as a kid. And then my dad used to do a bit of riding on the road, and he'd take me out on my mountain bike and he'd ride on the road. And then it was way too hard for me then. So eventually he just said, all right, we'll get you a crappy little road bike and see how you go. And I liked going for rides on the weekend with him. And then we are super lucky. We've got a really good velodrome right near the town I grew up. So the local cycling club, a 333 meter concrete velodrome, and with some really steep banking. So that's where I'd sort of learnt my craft as a junior was on the track up until about under 15s. I was never much good on the track, but I liked it. It was fast. I'd go there for an hour, do 4 races in that time, get to race against all my friends then, and then go home, and then the next day go to footy training or cricket or whatever.
Isn't that something about, you see in Australia, the resources that you put into sport and sports facilities is?
Yeah, I think definitely you see it as well around here, like especially my state, Victoria, and Melbourne is the capital of sport in Australia. Like they pride ourselves on the stadiums and just the culture here. So growing up, I was always going to be sporty coming from this area. But yeah, as you said, just super lucky to have that velodrome nearby. It's really sad now that it doesn't get used that much because track cycling's really died off in Australia. But I think it was a result of that golden period sort of in the 50s and 60s when track cycling was a big money sport here, and it was sort of, instead of people going and watching horse racing, they were going and watching track cycling and putting big bets on track cycling, and they were sort of household names, like the big cyclists back in those days. So I think, yeah, I sort of am still reaping the benefits of that from the infrastructure that we've got there. But unfortunately now the money's completely gone from track cycling, and it's just chasing Olympic gold. But that only comes around every 4 years. So for me, that was sort of part of the switch to the road. Was just I didn't like the training as much because you're just riding around in circles on a velodrome, and I've got such a nice area for riding around here. It was obvious to get onto the road, but yeah, the opportunities on the road to get to the top level are so much better now as well.
And how did you progress then from, your local club and, you were kind of doing well? How did you progress then to, competing in the Australian Nationals, taking the under 23 title and on from there?
Yeah, I think a lot of people sort of ask this, and some people they'll be racing their local, they'll get into their A grade club race, and suddenly they've got this idea in their head of, I'm going to be racing the Tour de France in 3 years. Whereas I didn't have that kind of mentality ever. I was always just focused on winning the next race. So when I was in last year of high school racing club races, I'd say, right, I want to win this race. And then there'd be a big open race. Like my local big open race finishes at the top of Mount Borbor, which is the hardest climb in Australia, and I've never been a pure climber, but I just went, all right, I'm going to try and win this race. And I was racing C grade back then, and I think I got second then. And then people were saying, oh, he's going to be a good climber. And then the next race would be a crit or something, and I'd be saying, all right, I'm going to try and win this. But the focus was always just on having fun, firstly, and then secondly, winning the races. So it was never sort of, I'm going to at this point do this. But I ended up getting a ride on a national series team, and got quite a good national road series in Australia here. So I was really lucky to win some open races in the B grade category while I was still in school. And then, that got me a ride on one of the national series teams, probably like a bit earlier than I was. One that just got picked up because the guy that ran the team was from my area, and he'd heard of me before. Whereas if I hadn't had that, then there's probably better riders than me at that point. But then as soon as I got in there, I wasn't expecting to get dropped. I was thinking, no, I just want to try and win this race. And I didn't win any races in that year, but I was getting on the podium by the end of that year. And then, that took me onto a team that then the next year ended up going over to Belgium and racing some amateur stuff there. And they sort of just put that idea in front of me and said, do you want to come over and do this stuff? And I thought, well, I've never been to Europe. I'd love to, and had no idea what to expect. But when it wasn't, that was probably the year when I went over there and raced the amateur stuff and won a few of the amateur kermesses. I thought, I can actually perform pretty well in this sport. Like, this is a big deal over here. People actually pay attention to it. And I'm getting some wins in these races that have thousands of people coming to watch, even though they're just amateur races. So that was sort of the point where I went, this is a sport I can keep pursuing and see how far I can go.
There was a real change in culture, I suppose, going to Belgium. The roads, the races. Like, we've been over to Flanders, and people really do turn up. They love the racing over there. A few beers, watching the race, and the weather could be blooming miserable.
Yeah. We couldn't believe it. The first year we went over, I think, I was 19 with two other 19-year-olds, an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old. And all of our first time to Europe, basically. And cycling in Australia is not a mainstream sport at all. It's probably similar to Ireland in that, we've got our big team sports and then cycling follows well behind those. But you still got a big participation at grassroots level. A lot of people ride a road bike, but the following for the top level of the sport, it just isn't there. Whereas you go over to Belgium, and this is like if you're counting down from World Tour, then you've got World Tour, Pro Continental, Continental, and then we're amateur, and there's still thousands of people coming and watching. There's these kermesses where you're starting at 6 p.m, so it finishes at 9 p.m, and all the pubs are full as they just watch you go around, and crazy loud music playing, but that kind of thing. We were just like, wow, this is amazing. Like, people actually care about this stuff. People are coming up after asking you to sign photos of yourself that they've found that I didn't even know existed. And that was a completely different atmosphere once you get over there.
And coming from, sunny days and, smooth, well-tarred roads, how did you find hitting the cobbles over in Belgium and the small country roads?
I think the country roads is really similar to where I am from here. I remember there was one race where it was really wet. I think I just assumed that year when I went over that there was never a time it wasn't raining in Belgium, because I think the whole time we were there it rained. But since I've been there a few times since, we've had better luck with the weather. But that first year I went, I was just thinking, how does anyone ride a bike here? But the roads were quite similar to Irish roads as well, just tiny farm tracks with cow shit all over them, basically. This is actually pretty similar to home, because where I grew up training here, the local bunch rides are riding on similar little farm roads. So I was thinking, geez, like this kind of racing really suits me. And then I sort of just took to the cobbles straight away. I was so excited to ride them, and it just suits the strong kind of riders that it's not suiting the lighter climber types, but if you've got the legs, you can get through those cobble sections at the front. So at that level I was racing there, I was loving any race that I saw cobbles on the circuit. I was excited about.
Deadly. We noticed from your Irish Instagram posts and that a lot of very agricultural teams. I'm wondering, are you from a very kind of agricultural part of Australia? I'm going to just pop up one of your mid-ride posts.
Yeah. Knock, knock. Who's there? Cows go. Cows go who? No, cows go moo.
I got the corniest one I could find.
Yeah.
So, a lot of your posts were about sheep and cows, and so you're from a kind of an agricultural area of Australia, yeah?
Yeah, really big dairy farming town. It's not a big town. Small little town called Druin. It's probably a similar size to Moat in Ireland, but about 100 k's east of Melbourne, and just nice rolling hills. All my friends basically are either dairy farmers or beef farmers. So I
know your way around the tractor, so.
No, I haven't done too much myself. I spend a fair bit of time out there with them, but I've managed to avoid most of the work on the farm. But I grew up in.
Are they good? Are they good?
No, they've got blisters on them from the gym, but that's about it. Not from a shovel at the moment. No, I grew up in a townhouse because my parents are both teachers, but definitely used to the rural area and the farm talk.
And tell us about your education then, because it's kind of interesting. You've a Bachelor of Science, which physiology major.
Yeah, so I was pretty big on maths and science at school, and I knew I wanted to go to university, but I never knew what I wanted to study. So I started the Bachelor of Science thinking I'll probably start that and go into engineering. And then I started doing some engineering stuff in first year, and it was really programming heavy, because that's obviously the way that that industry's gone now. And I thought, I don't want to be sitting behind a computer for the rest of my life. It's not that interesting. And I was doing a few biology subjects at the time, and the physiology stuff really interested me. And I thought, this is so relatable to my cycling, because I was just getting right into the cycling and the training at that point. And I was rocking up to lectures and thinking, I already know all of this stuff from riding a bike, and going to a nutrition lecture and thinking, I already know all this stuff because I have to do this to be well suited to riding anyway. So that kind of thing definitely steered me in that direction. And then, yeah, that's sort of gone hand in hand with the cycling since. And also I sort of just had so many people, because they knew I'd been studying that, asking me for advice and tips on their training, that's what sort of pushed me into coaching, because I ended up sort of falling into coaching people without even doing it formally. And then since then started up working with my coach that I've worked with, and he's a PhD. He knows just about everything there is to know about exercise physiology. But yeah, I've started coaching through his business as well, and really enjoyed that, because it's applying both the cycling and my university degree together.
So I was looking through your site, cyclistscientist.com.
Yep.
And like a big thing I was reading about, like you really go deep into the science, like I was trying to figure out endothelium-derived hyperpolarization and vasoconstrictor prostaglandin, but you actually explained it with a kind of a shovel analogy. That'd be right.
Yeah.
So you're taking really deep science and you're kind of making it very understandable for somebody who isn't scientific.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do, because unfortunately it's a big thing in the scientific literature to use all of those words, when basically they're just like that what you were saying then is just what everyone knows, is that if you're using your muscles in aerobic training, then they're going to get better at aerobic training, or like better at working aerobically. So in that sense, it's growing more blood vessels is the end result. But they're simple concepts intuitively, but they're just represented with crazy wording, and really hard to sort of both access the papers in a literal sense, in that it's hard to find them or get them if you're not going through a university, but also to be able to read them if you don't have that background. So the whole idea of that website for me is just to present information so that anyone can read it and use it, because I think so many people are getting trapped into listening to people that don't actually have the background expertise, and can, if you're starting out new in the sport, you can hear so many things and don't know where to look. So the idea of that is to give people somewhere to look where they can go, right, this is actually supported by science, because I can see it's all here and it's in a way that I can understand it and then use it in my own training.
You talk a lot about overtraining and the immune system, quality versus quantity, and using the shovel and the wheelbarrow analysis. Can you give us just a brief overview of that?
Yeah, so basically the idea behind training is you're trying to build your fitness. So you can think of your fitness as a big pile of whatever you're trying to make, and if you can keep piling that fitness on, it's good. So if you break up each week is essentially your little block of training that you're doing, and that's what you're putting in your wheelbarrow. So if you're trying to cram too much in that week, you're essentially just not going to be able to lift the wheelbarrow and get it over there and pile on that fitness. So it's great to chuck in like a crazy big week if you have the time, but you're not actually going to get better from it, because you can't manage that. You can't lift it and get it to where you want it to go. So then you're just going to be stuck there. That's useless. And now you don't have any actual means of getting better. So that kind of thing, it's just important to make sure that it's building on what you've done before, but it's a load that you can manage always is the key.
Yeah. Sean Dyson had a question. He said, for someone new to racing, what areas of their training should they prioritize and any race day prep?
It's going to depend on what volume you're doing. So if you've got the time to do the 5 or 6 sessions a week, then it's going to be a matter of every session going out with a goal. So even if it's a Rico day, I always tell people on their recovery days, you want to finish feeling better than when you started. That's the entire goal of that ride. Whereas your goal, if your goal is right, I'm going to work on aerobic stuff, so that's not going to be anything over threshold, then make sure you're ticking off that goal. Like it's not always great to go out and think, I actually went way harder than I needed to, that's going to do me better, because if that wasn't the goal of the day, then you haven't actually worked on your aerobic system. You've done a mixture of everything, and it's not going to have the same training benefit. So basically, I would say, yeah, if you're starting out, every session have a goal, and then it also makes the session more fun, because like it's hard going out training. Like it is nice to go out and just roll around, but yeah, if you're doing that 6 days a week, you can just think, geez, this is so hard to do this every day. Whereas if you've actually got a goal every day, then it's something to tick off.
The old KOMs and Strava are a bit of a poison chalice, aren't they, for the old recovery days?
Yeah, well, but the KOM's a great goal. So you have 1 day a week, and I have this is one of my sessions that I give to athletes. It's just, yes, Strava KOM hunting. Like that might be once a week or once a month for those that are following a fairly structured program. But yeah, that's just a great goal. Or a Zwift race can be another goal. Like just
throwing in a little bit of fun is important.
Yeah, it is a great goal once a week or once a month for some of my athletes. But yeah, they've just got that to aim for. And it's also something you can even structure training around, like for long periods without races, which everyone's had at the moment. Yeah.
We have around Galway, there's a phantom KOM flagger. Nobody knows who he is or she is. In terms of,
Right.
if people who've been breaking the 5 kilometer limit, right? And you can't cycle outside 5 kilometers and getting KOMs, they find themselves being flagged, and nobody knows who it is. I know a few people now who are fairly pissed after having their KOMs, hard-earned KOMs flagged. And once it's flagged twice, you can't get it back.
Yeah. No, that would be pretty heartbreaking if you've gone to all that effort.
James Finn there in challenge is asking, like, what importance do you put on weight training, both on the kind of off-season and, while you're racing?
I think I definitely do a lot more in the off season. Just logistically, it's a lot easier because I'll be in the one spot the whole time, so I can have access to a gym constantly. Whereas when we're during the race season, we're moving around so much, it's just hard to be able to incorporate it regularly. But I think I use it to help my sprint and short power mostly. But the other main thing is just for overall health. There's just so many signs that a bit of strength training and resistance training is just going to do you good in the long term in terms of bone density and muscle mass. Because cycling isn't a weight bearing sport, if that's the only kind of exercise you're doing, then it's not actually going to do you that well in the long term. So it's more just something a good, like it's still going to be beneficial to my cycling and it's beneficial to my overall health. And it's a good way to something else to work on, because in the off season I'm not going to be setting power PBs, whereas I can set PBs in the gym every week once I'm sort of starting up and getting back into it. Like at first I'll be deadlifting just the bar, and then each week can see that improvement really rapidly, which is something that you don't get to see on the bike. Like you're not seeing your FTP improve by 10 watts each week, whereas in the gym you're seeing 10 kilos more each time. So that's a nice aspect of it.
And during the race season, I mean, would you be still kind of squatting big weight, or would that impact upon your performance, or how do you approach the gym during race season?
During races, if like we're racing each weekend, I'll try on Monday or Tuesday get into the gym at some point. But a lot of it, I'll just make use of doing body weight stuff. So the same movement, but without any weights. Then it's more just an activation thing. So you sprint in the race, you're still recruiting those glutes that you spent all the off season working on, rather than just getting into sloppy movement patterns from not actually having to utilize those muscles.
Yeah. Actually, funny, I have a question here from Marty Mannion, who's Galway Bay Cycling Club, about protein. Now, Marty's one of big power man in Galway Bay. And what's the right way to approach taking protein? Because there's some lads absolutely shovel the stuff into them.
Yeah, I think it's all dependent on your lifestyle. This one I'll always, if I'm in control of my own food, I'll be trying to just get the protein in by eating a meal. I prefer to sit down and eat an omelette than I would to scull a protein shake straight after a ride. But if you're working, like I've been working a day job at the moment, and if I've been riding into work and doing a hard session on the way, and if I do that, then I'll sort of have the protein powder or a protein bar or whatever I can just to get that in before, if I'm pressed for time. So I think it's more a lifestyle thing, but if you have the choice for real food, it's always going to do you better to eat real food, is my opinion. And you'll find that it's super hard if you're training well as a cyclist to be in calorie surplus, like over your calorie amount, if you're eating real food. Like you can only really do that as a training cyclist if you're eating processed crap. So yeah, I think I'd always just recommend just real food, fruit and veggies, and then it's fairly hard to go wrong if you stick to that.
Getting back now to the Tour Down Under. That was
January this year.
January, sorry. I'm going to play clips from it here there of you in the Tour Down Under. Let's just share that.
Cyclist himself, almost over the top of Hawthorn Climb. Josh Wilson wants them. There's a little flinch there, but who wants them more? Cyrus Monk wants them more. The music man marches over the mountain.
And really for him, he's doing that in support.
Chris Harper from this group.
So the music man marches over the mountain. Great quote. But tell us about the Tour Down Under. I mean, you've been racing for Evo Pro cycling under Morgan Fox and in Ireland before you went back to Australia, for 3 years, was it?
Yeah, so that was part of coming home, was that this team in Australia, Cycle House, they basically just said, look, we really want you to come home and be able to race this kind of stuff, race the national championships with us. And I was staying with Morgan in Ireland at the time and just said, look, do you think this would be okay if I could do this kind of thing? And he said, yeah, 100% go for that if you have the opportunity, because we would have loved to be able to go over and race that. But it just wasn't possible because of the Australian border closures. So yeah, for Morgan to allow me to do that and have no problems with me racing for them while I'm here, I've just been super lucky. And he's definitely someone that would never stand in the way of someone being able to do what's best for them. So it's really lucky as a team manager we've got that kind of thing, because I do have a lot of people asking while I'm here, are you still riding with Evo Pro? How come they let you do this? Because so many teams, especially professional teams in Europe, would never allow that to happen. But yeah, Morgan's really good like that. He understands that we need racing to develop, to get better, and also we're racers. Like I don't ride a bike I really enjoy training, but I ride a bike to race. Like that's the thing I love the most. So for him to let me do that is, yeah, super lucky, and I really enjoyed being able to race that while I was here.
And it's the only racing going on in the world, really, in Australia, which must have been magic. Like, tell us what the Tour Down Under was like to race, get back racing in Australia.
And they need to start working together really smoothly and quickly to try and open up that gap.
Yeah, so I'd never got to races before because it's obviously a World Tour race, and the year I won the under-23 national champs, usually that's a ticket into the race as a wild card. But unfortunately, that's just when the WADA had brought in the whereabouts program, and I hadn't been placed on that whereabouts program yet, so I was ineligible. And basically, it was just an admin stuff up, and it cost me a chance to race that, which had always been my dream. Like I went over and watched that from when I was, I think, first time I was 9 years old, and still been going there pretty much every year since. So to actually be able to race it was amazing, even though it wasn't a World Tour race. It was just a domestic race this year, but we still had plenty of good World Tour riders there. And I wasn't sure how the form would be at all because I'd only been a month out of quarantine and I'd had a really messy finish to the year in Europe. I'd crashed and separated my AC in early October, and then spent the rest of October traveling around looking for a visa without a bike. So I'd had essentially 6 weeks off and just got back into training. So I was expecting some rubbish form, and then came there and was riding out of my skin for the first few days. So it was one of those nice surprise races, and I was able to make the most of it.
You did the likes of Richie Port. Who else was in it?
So all of the bike exchange team were there, all of the Australian riders from that team. So Luke Durbridge was absolutely flying there, and then the Australian track team, which all of them could pretty much be World Tour road riders in their own right. So like Luke Platt was on a blinder there. He was climbing just as well as Richie, and then like Sam Welsford can sprint just about better than anyone, and also like Cal O'Brien, who ended up second in the national champs. Like he's a world champion on the track as well. So like those guys, there's really good competition. Like there would have been 20 riders, all either on World Tour teams or capable of it. But yeah, it was really good to get to race against those guys, and then to actually be really competitive in the race as well was really pleasing.
And you took the points jersey. Did you go into it with a plan, with your team to be the main, to be in the shake-up for the points classification?
Yeah, so part of me coming back and racing with that team was Mark Seddon, who sort of built the team from the ground up. He's just got into cycling recently himself, so he doesn't have the background of someone like Morgan Fox, who runs Evo Pro, who's had the pro experience. Like Mark back here, he doesn't have the background, but he's got the passion. So part of me coming back was to take on the road captain role, which was also a bit of a director role in the team meetings before. So at that team meeting at the start of the tour, myself and another rider here, Matt Ross, who's really strong and got a good sprint on him as well. So we're similar types of riders and love a breakaway. So the goal for at the start of the week, I said, right, one of us is going to take home a KOM or a sprint jersey. Yeah. And it's often hard to choose that at the start of a week because it's going to depend on who's in what breakaway and who can pick up what points. But after the first day, we had Matt in the KOM jersey, and then it wasn't until the second last stage that I managed to accumulate enough sprint points. I think I got a few points on every day because I was in the breakaway on every day, and then it was only in the last criterium that I managed to actually seal the jersey. But it was the goal at the start of the week for us to take home that, because we knew GC wasn't an option with the likes of Richie Port there. So it was then a matter of, what can we target? And I knew the form was okay. Wasn't expecting it to be that good, but those jerseys are a lot more tactics often than they are strength. So that definitely suited me.
You must have got a great buzz out of the Tour of Australia after, being in quarantine and traveling and not being able to race for so long.
Yeah, definitely. Like? And especially being stuck inside for most of last year and toughing it out in Europe. And I was never at any point thinking of throwing it away, but there's definitely times where you just think, geez, this is a lot of hassle for not much return. Whereas that was good to get the return for all of the hard work, like all of that training that I put in last year when other people were thinking, there's no point doing all of that, like we're not going to be racing. And then, all the work that I put in last summer to get the return for all of that training was really nice.
G'day guys, welcome to another episode of Russ's All Irish Adventures. Beautiful day out here in the Midlands, and she's an absolute pearler in the Midlands when they're drying out the turf on the bog.
I think your high altitude training in the Slieve Blooms stood to you on Wollonga Hill.
That it's not it's actually there. Wollonga Hill's not too dissimilar to the Slieve Blooms climbs, but I think probably about 30 degrees difference on the day that we did it in temperature.
must have been absolutely sweltering.
Yeah, that played into my hands because I love the heat, and that was the hottest week of the year. It often is, but we had two days over 40 degrees, and the other two were high 30s. So it was a lot of riders suffer a lot more in the heat than what I do. I was hoping I hadn't lost that after being in Ireland for a year, but yeah, fortunately I was still able to handle it pretty well.
And coming back to Ireland there, actually, the question from David Connolly is what's the comparison with the league racing in Ireland? Like you turned up at some of our challenge Thursday night leagues with the team. What's the comparison with that, and then kind of racing like the Tour Down Under and Pro Continental on the continent?
Yeah, I think that I knew the guys would have this question, but I think what I was sort of saying to people there, and when I first started doing those league races, I was on the rivet just as much as anyone because I'd just been cruising around during the lockdown, doing a lot of long miles, but nothing intense. Those league races and the stuff in Ireland is just as intense as what we'd be racing in Belgium and in the pro races and the Tour Down Under here. The only difference is in Belgium it's like that for 5 hours, but at the league races it's an hour. So, but the speed's no different. Like we were in those handicaps there, we were averaging 46, 47k an hour, and we wouldn't average that for a one-day race in Belgium or like any of the Tour Down Under stages. We didn't average that, but the difference is just the length. It's just being able to do it for in the 4th and 5th hour, still put out that power and then lift again. Especially for me, because at those league races as well in the evenings, I was riding out there from Morgan's house and doing the 3 or 4 hours before. Yeah, it was good to simulate it, but it's the difference really isn't that much.
Yeah, so it was great to have you kind of racing, in our leagues. Like we were kind of lucky in a way with the old in a way with the lockdown. We got to see guys like you kind of racing in our leagues around Athenry and those places. That's you sprinting. That's Kilmessan actually. It's Sean Rowe photography.
Yeah, cyclists will always say you're always strongest on your home turf, and if you take any cyclist and get them to race against the Irish guys in Ireland, then they're going to be hard to beat. And it was really good for me because it's really good training to be over there and doing those against some guys that were absolutely flying after training really hard through lockdown. So it was a really good challenge over there and a really good level of racing.
Yeah, some nice hills. That's Knockaderry down in County Limerick. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, I think that's what you guys used as your champs course. But that was that was really really fun, pretty hard race there. But that was good fun. We missed the break that day. Like I think I missed. That was the thing. It's always hard to gauge how to race each place you go to and how to pick the breaks, because in Ireland there, I reckon I missed about 80% of the breaks, and even though I was one of the stronger riders, would just keep missing the moves and then having to try and ride across. And that was a day where I'd missed the move and then spent the whole race chasing and just didn't catch the last 3, so I ended up getting 4th. But and then I went to Tour Down Under, and even though we had plenty of good riders there, I managed to get in every breakaway for the race. So it's just knowing, after doing so much racing in Australia, knowing exactly when the break's going to go, who to watch for, whereas in Ireland I had no idea, and then was just struggling a lot to pick when the break was going to go.
And tell me, actually, I had a question there from Ronan McNamara and our club there. He said he was asking, it's kind of a bit of a funny one, saddle position. He says it seems you sit kind of low in the bike compared to most other riders.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, obviously quite short, and then that's just a bike fit I had here. I used to sit a lot higher, and then I had a bike fit with someone, and he said, "Look, you've actually got really short legs and a pretty long torso. You need to drop your seat 2 centimeters." And I just went,
2 centimeters.
I went, "No, that's crazy." And then I remember the first week when he did it, I just thought, this is stupid. I was riding around everywhere out of the saddle because it felt felt so strange. But then ever since, I've got super used to it. I used to have my knee flare up because the tendons used to just click against each other at the back of the knee, and it was probably because I was overextending a bit, and I haven't had any problems with that since that fit. That was 3 years ago now, I think. Right. And then I think just each rider is different. So I would definitely recommend a good bike fitter if you can get to one. Then I think if you look at each rider, even in the pro peloton, like Froome, for example, looks like he's sitting super low and he's won 4 Tour de France's off it. So it does mean I can get a lot lower, and that's definitely something that advantages me being in so many breakaways is being super low on the bike, and then also just being comfortable in an aero position for 5 or 6 hours if it's a long race, which if you get into a long breakaway, you're lying down with your forearms on the hoods for a lot of the day, trying to stay as aero as possible. So having that comfortable setup is key.
Yeah, it was very observant running McNamara. Question from Warren Blackburn there. What's your favourite road or climb in Ireland?
Oh, I think, that's a tough one. I think the best riding I did personally was probably out around Connemara area. So, and out towards Westport from there. So, Mayo. I think I wouldn't even know the names of the roads, but some of those, especially because I was super lucky, I was doing them just when the 5K rule had eased off, but you still couldn't really stay in hotels. So it's sort of the least traffic you probably ever see on those roads because there wasn't all the tourists that would usually be there. And some people said to me, those roads are usually really busy out that way. But sort of out past Galway City, like West Galway County, out around there, those roads are just amazing in the hills around there. Like for training, like specific efforts, they're not long climbs, but just for general riding and scenery, they were some properly amazing roads, like some of the best you'll find.
Yeah, good answer. It's our stomping ground. A question there from Keen Noon, right? It's kind of like bike and all the kind of main stuff aside. What's your best bit of sneaky kit? Have you one thing that you got that was just the best thing you ever got, and you always like, okay, I'll just show you, right? I have this vest I got about 10 years ago, right? It's in ribbons now, like, but I never leave home without it because I just can't get a vest like it anymore, and it's falling apart.
I think
me by now.
Mine would be the hamburger saddlebag. If anyone saw me training around in Ireland, I've got a saddlebag that looks like a hamburger. You can probably, if anyone looks, that's just got spare tubes and tie levers and everything like that. But I've had to do about 20 repairs on it because the straps keep wearing through on the seat rails because it was probably about a $2 job on some rubbish Japanese website, I think. But that's seen me out of a lot of issues on the road. Got my toolkit and everything in it, but managed just to save me a lot of times, and it's got the sentimental value, so I've managed to keep it and just repurpose a few old lanyards to reuse as straps to keep it going.
And tell us, what's your ultimate cycling dream? This is from Nigel Ford.
I think the standard cliche that everyone says still applies, like to ride the Tour de France would be pretty amazing, and that's obviously it's similar in Australia to Ireland. If you say you're a cyclist to someone that doesn't know anything about cycling, they say, do you race the Tour de France? And the answer is always hopefully one day. So that's still the goal. I think personally, I'd love to race Tour of Flanders more, and it's a race I would do better in. Like I managed to get a top 10 in the under 23 version of that race. So I'd love to be able to get to the elite Tour of Flanders. So those would be the two big goals in terms of a stage race and a road race. I think yeah, I'd love to keep working in the sport after I am no longer good enough to ride in it as well. So being a sports scientist for a team would definitely be a big thing for me. And I've been doing sort of like the riding with the amateur team here. I've sort of been doing a bit of that role and coaching a few of the athletes there. And then when we had our training camp in the Australian Alps here earlier this year, I was managing the training there and the recovery there. So that was sort of a good tester for that. And it's definitely something I think I'd like to get into after I hang up the bike myself.
And I know it's hard to plan, like with COVID and you know, the various lockdowns, but what are your kind of near-term plans then? Is it kind of coming back to Europe, coming back to Evo Pro, racing the continent? Do you have any kind of a picture formed now of the year ahead?
Yeah, so it's been really just at the moment for the last month treading water here and waiting to come back over. So ideally I'd be over there racing now, but we just don't have enough racing to warrant me coming over. Like we've got 13 guys on our roster, I think, and if there's only one race with 7 guys for April, then that's just going to be a lot of guys sitting around doing nothing. So for me, it's a matter of once we've got those races confirmed, then I can come over. And then also with Evo Pro, like for me coming over there, I can't get any support from like the government here in terms of if we get stuck with no racing, I need to be able to find a way home. And so the financial side of things, like we're always, I don't want to get stuck in a position where I'm stuck there, because at the moment the quarantine in Australia costs about €2,000 to stay in the hotel for 2 weeks, and we have to pay for that ourselves coming back. And then also the flight back obviously as well is super expensive at the moment. So for me personally, it's a matter of, usually we'd be able to sustain ourselves off prize money, but it's a matter of making sure that like the team, as long as we're rock solid with our finances, and I know I'm not going to get stranded on the other side of the world with no way home.
I'd say you must be bursting to get back racing too over this side of the world with Evo Pro.
Yeah, I've been watching all of the classics the morning after, because they're always on at 3 a.m. in Australian time. But it's been hard watching all the roads that I'd usually train on when I'm living in Belgium. And I was watching one with my mum and dad just there before, and like I was working on a research article actually at the time, so I was sort of half watching it on Ghent Wevelgem, and then I sort of looked up and went, I know that road, they're about to turn left into the Kemmelberg. And then Dad said, have you already watched this? And I said, no, I just know the road because I've been there enough. And then sure enough, 200 meters later, they turn left into the Kemmelberg. So it's that, like when I'm sort of doing that kind of thing, I'm like, oh, geez, I should be there racing. Like that's what I've been doing for the last few years, and that's what I'd love to be doing. But it's just obviously not a good time at all to be traveling around the world at the moment. So hopefully things do improve over there. I can get back over.
Let grasses grow, waters flow, a free and easy way. But give me enough of the final stuff that's made it all way.
Nice one. Bit of Clancy Brothers by.
Yeah, that was the one. Yeah, I had so many requests to come out, you black and tans, but I don't think no one in Australia knows of it. And then I just thought I've got to go for something with a bit of comedic value as well in there. So that one I'll have to save for when I'm back in Ireland and do a cover of that.
Kept just saying anyway, the music during the lockdowns.
Yeah, that was definitely, while I was over in Ireland was sort of when I started. I was so lucky the week before we went into lockdown, I bought a guitar from a secondhand music shop just because I've got a few over here, but I can obviously never travel with them when I've got the bike with me. So I just bought an old one, got it for €50 there, and then was able to play that all through lockdown. And it's just something to do rather than just ride the bike around in circles. So it was definitely lucky.
Brilliant. Well, look forward to hopefully seeing you back out on the road anyway. in the coming year. And Cyrus Monk, thanks a million for joining us, and for everyone from Challenge and from everyone in cycling and Connacht. Really appreciate it, and best of luck.
Beauty, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate being here.